So today I want to talk about two fundamental forces on Earth. But first of all, I want to clarify some things, just to assure myself or to make sure that what I'm talking about is actually being received in the way how it's intended to be received. So I'm obviously not a physicist. I didn't study quantum mechanics or quantum physics either. This is not how I go about things. If you watch my short clip called Bottom-up and Top-down approach, where I explain that there's two different ways of reasoning or two different ways of making sense of reality. And for me it is primarily the top-down approach, where the things I talk about or the things I know I mostly derive from within. And it's always based on my own experience or based on pure channeling. And sometimes I study things on the surface as well, but only to confirm the ideas that I come up with intuitively. Because I think it's fascinating when there's a synchronicity there, or the information matches on both sides. And when I say study things on the surface, I mean using my mind or my rationality to understand truth or to study truth. And we have to acknowledge that we are very programmed to think the rational way of reasoning is the most reliable or the most accurate way of measuring truth. But this is just simply not the case. So if anything, the mind, like the rational reasoning, raises more questions than it gives answers. And another thing I want to say is that I'm aware of the fact that truth goes incredibly deep. It has many layers to it. So putting that into perspective, we have to acknowledge that we basically don't know anything. Like none of us do. And even what we know constantly changes. It constantly gets modified, updated, reconstructed, recycled. So give it some time and I will tell you some new things on today's subject. I will likely have a deeper angle on it. And another thing, I think it's very difficult to navigate through this online world where there's so much access to information. And when you look at this information in its totality, there is so much contradicting and conflicting knowledge. It's like all these fingers like pointing in different directions, and everyone is so convinced of their version of truth and they want to try to convince you. And people tell you to do this, and then other people tell you not to do this but to do that. And I don't know, I think it's very overwhelming, and we have to be careful because we can't really trust everything to be true. We can't really rely on all the information to be true, especially when you consider that everyone is conveying their version of the truth with so much confidence that we can easily get a false sense of credibility or a false sense of reliability just because of this confidence. And so for me, I always have to remind myself that there's no absolute truths coming from anyone, because there's always a degree of relativity or a degree of subjectivity, because we're all biased, like in varying degrees. So, and one last thing, a lot of the things I'm talking about are not meant to be taken literally. because I use language often symbolically or metaphorically. So many people don't have the ability to understand symbolic language, and then they have to like get into discussions with you or attack you for what you said, even though they just don't really understand the true meaning of it. Anyway, so yeah, to come back to my actual subject today. So there's a fundamental polarity inherent in all things. Like a constant dance of opposites, everything is fluctuating between two sides, and that is within a bigger circular movement that represents time. At the center of the earth, you could say there is two vortexes representing two fundamental polarities. There's a positive polarity that is pulled upwards towards the North Pole, and there's a negative polarity that gravitates downwards towards the South Pole. Or in other words, there's the force of light and there's the force of gravity. The force of light is alive, it's conscious, it's got free will, it's the most efficient energy source. It has no mass, but it has the ability to alchemize mass into light. The force of light represents the spirit, it represents consciousness, it represents the life force. And then there's the force of gravity, which is neither conscious nor does it have free will, it is self-determined. The force of gravity exists in mass. Mass has energy too, but it's confined due to its density. So mass has this inherent mechanism to preserve itself because it considers its energy of short supply. So this force might represent the ego. It can represent the unconsciousness. It represents the death force. So there's this battle on Earth that we experience on an individual level, but also collectively, which is between light and matter. The conscious side of us is driven to transmute as much mass as possible and to travel upwards as light. It consumes mass and expands as a result of it. Or in other words, it transcends the ego and it is setting free the spirit. Its aim is to return to its original state, which is a state of pure potential that has not taken on any form yet. The unconscious side of us acts as an inversion of that. It does the exact opposite. So it aims to materialize the spirit, to consume light and turn it into matter, to take from the spirit and to feed the ego, to solidify the energy and restrict its flow. Its aim is to transmute pure potential into particle form. So it is an inverted expansion, therefore a contraction. And you see this contraction in how it's separating itself off to preserve its energy. And it's very hypocritical, just how the ego is in nature. Like, it wants more energy, it wants more of the light, but it's cutting itself off from the energy field that it's inherently a part of, the one big energy field. And it's also cutting itself off from the source of the energy. So it is restricting the energy flow. So it's like both forces are driven to go in the direction of singularity. The force of light is transmuting density and expanding, and it aims to unify all existence into one. The force of gravity is solidifying the energy and restricting its flow, and it aims to concentrate all existence into singularity, like in form of dark matter. So if you look at this from the stance of the absolute, then you could say, well, there's only one force, which is the force of light, and it is on a spectrum. So consciousness in its very undeveloped state is vibrating on very low frequencies, and it's governed by fear. And then consciousness in its very developed states is vibrating on very high frequencies, and it's submerged in love. So what I'm saying is that, yeah, ultimately it's all fine. It's all playing out according to a higher plan. But there's different implications here on Earth. So it is very important to understand darkness, or whatever you want to call it, to understand and study its origin, its agendas, especially because it's something that flows through everyone. So it's an energy that is trapped in a low vibrational state, fueled by fear. It has this self-preservation instinct, and simultaneously it's falling. So there's no one in the driver's seat. It is opposing consciousness. It is very deceptive, very manipulative, and very infectious, and it has an immense power over this material realm. So this is really dangerous, if you ask me. And of course it occurs in different severities or different degrees, but this gives birth to unimaginable evil. So to conclude this, there's two roads you can go by. One is the road of contraction, the road of service to self. This road is about sacrificing others for self. This road ultimately leads to the darkness. It leads to division, to destruction, chaos, war, hell. And then there's the road of expansion, the road of service to others. This road is about sacrificing self for others, as in sacrificing the ego. This road ultimately leads to the light. It leads to peace, harmony, unity, equality, righteousness, justice, heaven. So, as I already said, we're all fluctuating between two sides, between our ego and our spirit, between our mind and our heart, between our unconsciousness and our consciousness. It's like with one foot we're going in one direction, and with the other foot we're going in the opposite direction. So we have to become aware over these fluctuations. We have to become aware of the ways in which we identify ourselves. And we can't stop the vibration, the going back and forth between two sides. But we can choose overall to follow the life force or to follow the death force. And every time we are unaware, every time we are ignorant, or we are losing ourselves in fear or inertia, this is when by default we're going in the direction of gravity. So we're falling. Anyway, that's all I have to say in this video, but this video is not complete. There's so much more to it. And I want to go more into depth with some of the things I said and also give you examples and show you how this darkness or this force, how it's like operating specifically and what it has already accomplished so far. So, because I mean, there's so many different angles from which you can study darkness. So you can also like use different terminology and all that. But yeah, I will leave it at that. And make sure to subscribe to my channel if you find this helpful or if it resonates with you, just so that it can spread more. And if you haven't already, check out my shop. It's like full of art. I've created so many pieces of jewelry and I can't wait to actually send them out there. And this also, of course, supports me. It buys me more time so I can actually create more content for you. So anyway, yeah, I'm sending you a lot of love, and I really appreciate that you take the time to listen to what I have to say.